Hey there, welcome to the Breakthrough Creative. I'm your host, John McDevitt, and this is the place where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. Last week, we heard from Dan Barry, a cartoonist, podcaster, and educator from Shrewsbury in the UK. He's the host of the podcast Make It, Then Tell Everybody. That's been running for 10 years and over 200 episodes, featuring interviews with other comic book artists and illustrators about how they do what they do. He's been making comics since the late 2000s and has a book out soon. It's called Rivers. It's a follow-up with writer David Gaffney to the book The Three Rooms in Valerie's Head. Both of these are available from Top Shelf Comix. He is a comics educator and for 11 years ran a degree in comics in North Wales, UK. He now gives workshops and short courses alongside his freelance work. And you can get online mentoring from him if you would like one-on-one. I went and checked it out. I had a really good time talking with Dan. And if you enjoyed last week's episode, you are surely going to enjoy this week's. Before we get to the interview, if you would please subscribe to the show, and if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and then hit the little notification bell, and drop me a line and let me know that you're out there. And if you're listening on podcasts, would you on Apple Podcasts go and give me a 5-star rating and then leave a written review? That would be really helpful and encouraging, and I really appreciate it. And now, on to our part 2 of last week's interview, which goes into this week's interview. So I guess it's the same interview, but it was too long to do as one. So here we go, part 2. Cheers. And I think, like you say, there's a season for capacity above normal. Sometimes there's that season where you go, right? But you know, I've been on this kick reading about comedians and how they work their craft. And it takes a lot of effort to make it look like they're making it up in the moment, right? Which is kind of what a good comedian does, and they're usually good storytellers. But Seinfeld talks about writing every day. He writes every day, and his writing every day is 2 hours. He said, I've got 2 good hours in me, and I'll sit down in the morning, and it's all morning. Like I'll sit for 4 hours or whatever, but I get 2 hours of writing, and it's thinking and it's working and it's shaping, and then I'm done. And then he's on to a different part of the craft after that, whatever, if he goes and he does a show and performs or whatever. But I find that with like I have a few different gears of creating, right? Like I work a lot in Illustrator and Vector, and I work in Procreate. I believe you work in Procreate.
I do,
and there's a time in a project where I need to have my creative wits about me and really be pouring into it. And that's kind of where the magic and the heart of the piece is. And then there's an element of finishing the work that's like, okay, I can put the radio or TV on in the background, and I just need to paint this, or I need to sketch it, or I trace, or whatever it is. It's a little bit less strenuous.
I there's a point in each project. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a comics project. When I'm because you were talking about the different kinds of creativity and the ways that you have to sort of switch your brain between different aspects of a project. This for me is where all the thinking takes place. I'll try and not block the microphone. So I have a big book, and it's got a dot grid on it. So this is where I'll try and figure out the story. Usually it's the entire story. Let's get some nice Foley work in there. Sounds good. So I'll have things like the environments laid out in kind of on an isometric grid on one page. So everything that I know that I'm going to draw will exist. And I can, plan out the environments so that I know that they're asymmetrical, so that the reader won't get confused about where we are. I'll maybe plan out colors to indicate where things are going to go and how they're going to work, and then I can use that to plot out the pages. And they're not beautifully drawn. You can tell I've on this one. You can tell I've spilt coffee across the page here, to my shame. It doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to get me to the next step, which is being comfortable enough to draw it. So this is the difficult part. This is where I feel like all the heavy lifting gets done. This is where I put in a lot of brain sweat, trying to make sure that I'm prototyping it. And there's lots of errors. There's a boat in the story that has to be plausible enough for a character to sail along a river and bad enough to kill him as well. So I've written here, needs to have all the outward appearance of an actual boat without actually being any good, like plausibly a boat. These bits need to be a bit reminiscent of that bit in the other bit of the book. I can't say what I've written there because it will give the game away. The boat needs to be a bit rubbish, but it has to kind of work. The character needs to think of it as a love boat. He's the kind of guy who would try and use it as a punt because he doesn't know how to use a paddle properly. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm building a boat. I'm working out the materials because the guy has to build a boat in there. And I'm looking up videos on, how other people have made boats, what are at least stable kinds of boats, I'm getting really deep into the research on this kind of boat that I know I can make it plausibly kill him because I'm going to draw it killing him later in the book. This is the sort of level of detail you get into. And you're thinking about the costumes of the characters, the mannerisms, where they're going to take place. You're being the lighting designer, the color designer. You're having to, find cool cars to draw. Then you're having to learn to draw them from different angles. This one I had to design a series of different products, like soups, because that was part of the story. So packaging design there as well. So it's really, for me, this is about getting it wrong over and over again so that by the time I come to do it properly, I get it as close to right as I'm ever going to get it. So I don't know if it really makes sense to anyone else but me. I like to think that it's all readable. I guess. I hope it is. What I'll do with this then is I'll scan it in, I'll blow it up to the size it's actually going to be drawn at, and then I'll lightbox it onto watercolor paper, and I'll do it scene by scene. So I'll do a scene of all the line work. So I'll get my the pen I'm drawing it in, and I'll draw it, and I'll do that scene, and then I'll watercolor everything in that scene, and then I'll scan it and letter it, and do all the the post-production, tidying up all the bits of breakfast cereal that got scanned in as well by mistake, and then I'll repeat.
Is there a script, or so you write it out? Do you kind of write it and then maybe draw bits and then write to that, or how do you build it?
Well, this one is it's with a writer called David Gaffney. So we collaborated on this one. So the way this one worked is I had an idea about taking a boat along a river and accidentally drowning yourself. That was my fun story that I wanted to do a story about, and that was about as much as I had. And David had an idea about a guy who invents an app to find the cause of a childhood tragedy. I'll try and keep it relatively vague, so as not to ruin the story. We'd worked together before, so we did a book called The 3 Rooms in Valerie's Head beforehand. So we'd worked together before. We work, very well together. It's a very neat, comfortable working relationship. So I sort of fed David my ideas, and he made them kiss his ideas and sort of smooched them together for a bit. And then he sent me a draft of the script, and I read it and said, "Oh, I like this. Don't move this to here. Do this. And we bounced it backwards and forwards a bit until it was time to draw it. And then I drew it. He didn't do any of the drawing.
How do you find the partner? How like, was it just easy? You guys just fell into it, or how did?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of had a project that was almost like a bit of an airlock that sort of eased us into it. This book, The 3 Rooms of Valerie's Head, we were approached by a festival who said, "Would you like to collaborate We have funding to do a performance. Would you like to collaborate with a writer? I said, yeah, sure. So we had to do this performance comic, which ended up being this book. So David was doing microfiction.
What does performance mean?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay.
So he'd written a couple of books of microfiction, which are stories of exactly 150 words, and they were odd, strange, sometimes sad, sometimes funny, always incredibly interesting stories. And we were going to work through adapting some of these very short stories. So they're exactly 150 words. So we got together and we got on, and we figured that we could probably take these stories and string them into one continuous narrative. And we found a way of taking these completely disparate stories and we strung them together, and it became this book. So the way that it's drawn, I mean, the reason it's a landscape format book is because it was performed in a cinema. So it was on the big screen. And so David would do a dramatic reading. I'd be sat there working the keynote with the visuals coming up on the screen without the lettering, of course. David was doing all the voices. And we had a musician called Sarah Lowe's doing live music there as well. So it was a bit like being in a band, trying to sit there and work out, like, have we got our time cues right? Yes, now the piano comes in, and then there's the bit with the heavy breathing, and then so it was really cool. And we only ever performed it once, and it, never got performed again, which is sad. I'd love to do it again. And then it's been since published by Top Shelf. So because we had the format of the screen being widescreen, and that's why the book is widescreen format. So because we had this, I guess, ready built-in format for us, adapt some of these stories into one story. We had a working relationship, I wouldn't say forced on us, but the template was kind of already there for us to slip into. So then when we came to work on Rivers, the relationship was already in place. We had, a working relationship. We had a working relationship that was very easy to work through. It's nice because there's not a lot of ego in there. If David says, "Oh, I don't like this, can you change that?" It's easy enough for me to go, "Yeah, that's fine." Yeah. And similarly, if I say to David, "Oh, I don't really like this scene." I mean, in the book we've just finished, there was a whole character I just killed one day. Just doesn't exist anymore because it didn't really do anything for the story. And there's no sort of hard feelings about it because it's for the sake of the book and it's a better story as a result of it. So it's remarkably easy.
How long did you guys rehearse before you did the performance?
There was like a day beforehand.
Yeah. So you ran it a couple of times maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really close. I think I was still drawing it like the week beforehand. And I think the day beforehand, I was still, batch processing things in Photoshop and making sure that they were in the right order.
And
it was pretty close.
Did you illustrate it in Photoshop then, or color it in Photoshop?
All entirely on paper.
Oh, on paper. Oh, okay. But then you add the bubbles and the words later?
Yes, yeah.
That makes sense.
Because the optimist in me is thinking, if this ever gets translated, I want to have maximum flexibility on the page to be able to sort of
if
whip
they
out
ever
that English language.
Release a Latin version, right?
If they ever, did translated into any dead language, not just Latin.
We've
Old
got
Cornish.
This Sanskrit is flying off the shelves.
You need a Rosetta Stone to get through this book.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Tell me, this seems like a natural segue, and if I'm missing something, please pull me back. But tell me then about your is it hour comics or one-day comics or?
So there's a couple of variations. There's hourly comics, which is where you do a page of comics for every hour that you're awake in a normal day. So this is the comic you've been talking about where I had flu. I think I was just unwell, lying on my couch, just feeling really sorry for myself. So that's a challenge as it is, because you don't get excused from everyday life and you sort of document the things that you've been doing in that day, which is strange. It's a strange exercise, but it's fun to go online and see what other cartoonists are doing and get that sort of sense of camaraderie. That's really nice. And then there's 24-hour comics, which is where you draw a 24-hour book or story within the space of 24 hours nonstop. So you stay up all night and draw until you're done.
And is it fully finished at the end of that? It's got to be rendered and everything?
Everything.
That's the spirit of it.
So this one I did in September. So this is a book called Just Keep Paddling.
Yeah.
This is about a canoe trip I took down the river near my house. So traveling from Wales to my hometown. So there's about 20 something miles, I think. So I was in Denmark, sort of between lockdowns. I was teaching in Denmark. The lockdown lifted and I was able to fly into Denmark. And then that night, lockdown shut the borders again. So I found myself in Denmark for 2 weeks teaching, sort of alone in my apartment. And I thought I'm going to do a 24-hour comic because it arrived at that particular time. So I drew, I think this one's slightly more than 24 pages. I think this one's 30 something. So draw the whole thing in the space of 24 hours and then you have a book that exists. So I've done a few of those ones.
Yeah, and so you released the book. So you're not releasing like the whole story online digitally, because why would anybody buy the book, or is that how it rolls?
Oh, a bit of both, yeah.
I
mean, people like to read the book, you know. I think as it was going up, I was putting it on Instagram, but these were like very terribly tired photographs in the middle of the night from my phone, in the dark in Denmark. So they're not the pinnacle of photography.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Then I'll composite them once I got home. I put them together and printed and bound them and sold them as. Let me do a little Foley work again.
Oh,
a book.
Okay. I sounded like I was at the chiropractor for a moment.
It's a good riffle.
Riffle's a great word.
Really good word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are sort of fun. I like those challenges because no matter how sort of down you feel about your work, like you can be having a rough time with your work, like, oh, is it any good? I don't know. The feeling of not really achieving anything, and in one day, all of a sudden, you've got a whole book. It's a really good feeling. You go through incredible waves of like euphoria and despair over the course of that 24 hours. In the darkest time, like before the sun comes up, it's pretty bleak. You just want to die. You really do want to just get into bed and not wake up again. And then the sun comes up and you feel all right and it's okay. And you've drawn a book. It's quite good. I like it. And it's good to remind yourself that you're capable of doing that amount of work in that time, and you can stretch yourself to fill that time and that effort. And you can balance your ability with the time that you have to make something that is acceptably good. It doesn't have to be incredibly good, and it doesn't have to be the best of your abilities. And I feel it gets a bit of a free pass because everyone knows that you, for want of a better expression, farted it out overnight.
And then you can take a month off. You're done. I did my work. Look what I did. Yeah.
I did a whole book last night.
Yeah.
But then you come away with this false sense of achievement, thinking, I should do this once a month. I should do this once a fortnight. Like once every 2 weeks, I should do a 24-hour comic. Probably shouldn't. It's not humane.
And then you're in the middle of another one. You're going, why am I doing this?
What have I done? Oh God, it's so dark outside. What am I doing? My family have all grown old and moved out.
3 a.m. Where am I? Am I in Denmark?
Yeah. I don't know anymore.
Yeah. Oh,
dreadful.
Oh, that's good. So how do you knit all of this together in regard to making a living?
I try to, when I quit the job, so I had this period of 11 years where I had very comfortable financial stability, which was very nice. And so anything I was doing creatively that, supported me financially was just this delicious extra money. It was very nice. It gave me the confidence that I knew I could make money, so there would be times where, I'd make pens. I don't know if I talked about this. I invented a way of making a folding nibbed pen into a fountain pen. So this is a version of one of them. So I made a bunch of these and they sold very well. I'm working on the next version, which has a stainless steel nib and is it's pretty good. It's not ready yet, but I'm really quite happy with it. I've sent some sort of testers out to some friends to see how they get on with it, and hopefully they're like, yeah, this is really good. So we'll see how that goes. So all of like the interesting, fun little sort of distractions that I do instead of watching Lost, I've always found a way of turning it into money in some way.
Yeah.
The podcast has a Patreon, and that turns over some money each month, which is always really nice. The pens I make turn over some money. The books I make turn over some money. The self-publishing I do turns over some money. When we can do, comic festivals and shows, that always turns over some money. And I think if I relied on any one thing, it would be very difficult, because individually, all of those things are incredibly volatile. The pens I make are, or certainly the brass ones, I make them here in my workshop. This is my studio and workshop. It's a cabin that I built at the bottom of my garden. I only learned the hard way that brass is poisonous to humans. If it gets into your lungs, it makes you really ill.
So if you're grinding it or whatever and you're breathing in the dust,
it gets in through your skin as well. So it's not good for you, hence the stainless steel. So that's, again, it's not sustainable. Plus there's not a year-round demand for it for whatever reason. It seems to sort of ebb and flow, and the same with comics, especially long comics. When they take well over a year to make, that's a good chunk of your time where you've got to dedicate a lot of brain power on these things. So I found that in terms of money, there's times where I'm working, I'll maybe have an advance for a book or a grant from the Arts Council for some of the books as well. So the Arts Council in England fund some of these books. So there'll be a lump of money that comes in, and I think, right, okay, this will pay for my time until 6 months from now, at which point I need to start making monthly money again so I can start focusing again. So that's been the interesting thing, I think, moving from getting paid every single month, regardless of how hard I'm working or how much I care about it, to being, right, now I need to think about me 6 months in the future and planning things that far in advance. I think the closest I have to a salary is the Patreon for the podcast, but that still needs constant feeding, because if I neglect it, I don't get paid.
Right. You've got to be creating content for that.
Yeah.
So that's an under the hood kind of look at things, right?
Yeah.
Mishmash.
Yeah. It's, I think you would call it a diverse portfolio.
Yeah.
But that suits me. That my handle on Twitter, my website has been Things by Dan since, I think I bought that website in like 2001, 2002, because at the time I just made things. I didn't make websites. I didn't just make films. I didn't make any one particular aspect of whatever it was that I did creatively. It was just things. So it was Things by Dan. And the thing I do predominantly is comics, because it takes up the lion's share of my time. But it seemed to be the best way at that point of describing what I did and what I wanted to do. And I think it still describes what I tend to do now. I think if this was, the Victorian era, they would call me a tinker, sort of traveling from town to town, fixing people's shoes and then thatching their roofs or something.
And then moving on.
And then
trying
moving
not to die by boat. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So when I quit, I tried to think, what are the things that I do? What are the categories of the things, so that I can sort of cycle through them and give each an equal amount of attention and thought. And it worked out into being, this is going to sound really awful, but entertainment, products, and education. Those were the big sort of umbrella headings that held the things that I did. So in terms of the comics, that would be entertainment, the 24-hour comics, the graphic novels, the dumb stuff that I put on Twitter, like, here's a weird drawing. Like, it's all entertainment, but I'd not really thought of it in those terms before. And it either makes money or it builds profile. And I don't like talking about it in these terms because it sounds quite cold and heartless. But there is a proportion of people who follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and I think it works out to be about between 2 and 4% So whatever that total number of followers is, between 2 and 4% can be reliably sort of projected to buy whatever I make. So if I have 10,000 followers, I can reliably say that between 2 and 4% of those will buy a thing that I do, which is a small number, really. So then I need to think,
but as far as percentages go of sales, it's pretty high.
It's not too bad. It's a good
1 to
conversion rate, really.
1.5% is kind of the mark. And
Yeah.
so 2 to 4%, that's very cool. That's good.
It's not bad. Yeah. So it's, I always feel like, some sort of sneering, like Muppets villain, like 2 to 4% of my overall. Like, I don't like thinking about, because these are people, and I do like them. They're nice people, but there comes a point where I need to pay my mortgage, and these things don't pay themselves. So in terms of the products as well, then I'm looking at things like the books that I produce here at my house. So I have binding equipment and a printer that, again, needs feeding consumables and supplies, and it breaks down. It's broken down at the moment, and I need to buy some chips for it to replace things to make it work again. So, that sort of jack of all trades repairman hat that I have to put on sometimes, like crawl underneath a giant printer in my garage and fix a big production printer. That sometimes happens. Or weld the handle back onto my guillotine so I can actually make books again. Dumb stuff like that. So there's products, pens as well. They're in a period of refinement and development at the moment. Trying to work out what kind of equipment I need to buy to actually get this next version to be economical and also ethically produced, where I don't feel like I'm pumping poison into the planet or my body. Trying to figure that stuff out.
That's necessary.
Especially
well, I don't want to downplay the planet not being poisoned, but you certainly don't need poisons in your system.
I mean, my because I have a workshop here and I'm making things rather a lot. I cut my hand quite badly a couple of weeks ago. Like it wasn't a little one. It was one of the sort of the gushers. We call it a gusher. And I came in to get a bandage on my hand. My son goes, "Why are you always trying to murder your hands?" Yeah, he has a point. He does have a point there. It does seem to be like Dad disappears into his little hovel, murders his hands. So yeah, I have to watch out for that.
Son, I hear your voice, but is that you underneath all that red?
Keep talking, I will find you. Yeah. And then the third category would be education. So this is the thing that I think I have the most experience in, having done it, for the majority of my adult working life. I go and do it occasionally overseas.
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point, I think, with education and teaching comics and illustration where I think I got quite good at it. But when I left, I felt like, no, forget that. Not doing that again. I've done it. And I'm never doing it again. But I realized after a little while, I actually really like it. I like working with other people, and I like explaining things, and I like talking about things. So I've been working on trying to figure out how I do this sort of personal one-to-one thing as an online course, and how I get the stuff that's inside my head beamed efficiently into someone else's head. So that's been the thing I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, is how to try and teach the things I've learned about comics in a way that is easy to understand, basically practical, the utility part of it again.
That's going to be a great course, or courses. So. That's going to be fantastic. Yeah.
Again, it's that thing where the more I do, the more work I do on it, the more I realize there is to work on it. The more the more I try to simplify it, the more complicated it becomes as well.
Yeah.
So it's it'll get there. It'll get there soon, I think. Because I feel like, again, quite motivated.
Yeah. It's like rendering a lawn, right? And how many blades of grass are you going to render? or how are you going to say, I'm going to render half of them and then the background becomes a deep blue and green? Right. Yeah.
I think the way I do it is like, Just a little scribble, just near the
There you
feet of
go.
the characters.
There you go. That's a lesson. You're done. You've got a quarter of your course done.
This is how we do a lawn. Lesson 1, lawns. Lesson 2, cars. It's just window frames. Window frames and steering wheels.
Lesson 3, bandages. You're set.
You just need red for this one, no white.
Oh
yeah.
my.
So
Oh
yeah,
my.
I mean, I guess to answer your question is not doing one thing. I think if I relied on one thing to make money, I would have to do it exceptionally well. And I think I know that I'm easily distracted, and I like doing lots of different things. So I think it suits my temperament and my personality to sort of flit around between things, and jump around a lot.
It's fun to tinker, right?
It really is. I mean, yeah, I've kind of built a life around it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good for you, man. There's people who are dying to have a life like that, and they're suffocated in their jobs and lives, and I it's freedom. It's really freedom, isn't it, to be able to do these different things? I mean, there's challenges, but there's challenges everywhere.
Yeah, I think the thing I always think about with making things is there's always a period of fear. Like, what if I get it wrong? Mm-hmm. Where's this guitar? There's a guitar there, and I bought a bunch of bits off eBay. Like, there's a whole like sort of sub eBay bit of guitar eBay, which is old bits of guitars that someone took some gloss black paint and like painted it black to make it look cool in like the 90s or the 80s or something, and then it stopped playing and they hated it, and it ended up in someone's attic for 20 years, and then they took it apart and realized they couldn't put it back together, and then it was cheap and you could buy these bits. So this is why I got so many guitars, is I'd get all these bits and then try and put them back together into a nice workable instrument, really cheap, but there's a joy in putting something together, but there's also a fear of, I'm going to mess this up profoundly and it won't work. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But there's that stubbornness of like, no, I'm going to make this work. This will be a thing that I'm going to do. And if it means I have to learn how to do something new, then so be it. And you have to be. I think of it as being willfully ignorant of the consequences. Like, I'm going to just completely ignore that I might lose a finger here on the bandsaw.
Yeah, I can tell you, most people that I interview, there is that spirit about them. There was a guy I had on, and he's a cymbal smith.
Oh,
makes cymbals.
Yeah.
And we started chatting, and he said, "Yeah, so I put the cymbal on the lathe, or I put the raw material on the lathe." And I said, "Stop." I said, my father worked with a lathe. He would turn table legs and stuff like that on a lathe. A lathe is not a 16 to 22 inch diameter thing. It's not that kind of tool. Where'd you get your lathe? Well, I made it. What? I said, yeah, I had to make it because I couldn't find one, so I made it. Really? Wow. Yeah, and I made all the tools for it too, because I did. It's just really cool that here's a guy. He's not a mechanic. He's not a machinist, and he said, "Wow, I guess I got to figure this out."
Willfully ignorant of the consequences. That's
desperation plus desire.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the stuff.
Yeah.
Or just desire. I don't think you have to be desperate. It helps.
Yeah. It's helped me. I'm weird. But yeah, I mean, desire is really good. Desire, it's powerful.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, have I missed anything? Is there anything else we should cover? I just want to stop and go meet at a pub somewhere and sit and drink and laugh. No, that's what I want to do.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Denmark, 3:00.
Let's go. Let's go.
All right, here's what I usually close with. I usually ask my guests. No,
I remember what you were going to say, because we mentioned this beforehand. This is me putting on my radio voice and hijacking your podcast. You are going to ask me about marketing my podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you personally, but let's do it now. That's good.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you grow it? How did you market it? And is Patreon a part of the deal too?
Yeah, I think so. The
Yeah.
So the way that I started it is I didn't have, a huge audience of my own. I think I had I think at the time maybe 600 followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't think Instagram was a thing at the time. And when I started interviewing people, I think I thought that there were 50 people in comics who made comics. And I thought, I will interview 50 people. I will take 2 weeks off, and that will be 1 year, and I will have interviewed everyone. 2 weeks off for Christmas, and then we're done, and I don't need to do it anymore. But every time I interviewed someone, I would be sort of introduced, the fog would peel back a little bit. I'm like, oh, there's more people here. And you get introduced to more and more people. And then you realize I'm never going to interview everybody. This is wild. There's too many people. How would you ever do this? This is insane. So in terms of actually marketing the podcast, I really feel like I haven't done anything. I've never advertised anywhere. I don't think I've, other than sort of mentioning it on Twitter or Instagram eventually, having a website. I've done some live events and like panel discussions at festivals, but by and large, the principle I took was other people's captive audiences. I couldn't rely on these 600 people that followed me on Twitter to be the base of the audience for this podcast, because that's just not enough people. So I would try and get the people that I knew and respected with bigger audiences. Not always bigger audiences, because I don't want it to sound like I was constantly like, who's got more followers on Twitter? There was always, a big bump in numbers when someone with a larger following was on the show. And so balancing the number of followers of people I was having on, like it then, a proportion of those people would hang around for the rest of the show. And the more people talked about it, the more it seemed to, I guess, grow. I don't know. But I feel like at a certain point, it just became absolutely ordinary that it was a thing that existed. And now it just is a thing that exists, and it's no longer remarkable in any way.
Oh, I don't know about that. At all. I think what's amazing is that you showed up every week, right? You said you had
Most weeks.
a hiatus.
There's a couple of hiatus.
You showed up, right? You showed up, and you created a place where stories could be shared about a particular focus that you guys both love, and there's an audience out there that found it, and they found the quality, and that's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I try and rely on word of mouth, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like I grew up in an age of advertising where I'm very, very cynical about anything that gets advertised to me. Mm-hmm. So if enough people say, oh, you should try lasagna, you'll love lasagna, I'm gonna be, well, that's me never trying lasagna then. I'm very contrary, I think, about what the cool kids say I should or shouldn't be doing. So I've always been a little bit hesitant to advertise, because I know that I feel quite repelled by advertising for the most part. So I've never really seen the point. And I'm sure, there's some marketing gurus out there who are pulling their hair out hearing me talk about this. And I'm sure it would have taken far less than the better part of a decade to get to this point.
I think that's
I don't care.
I think that's an artist / creative bent too, right? It's like when you broke your business down in kind of these three categories, right? Or like entertainment, education, it elicits in some of us the picture of a boardroom, right, with the evil Muppet whomever, right? But it's like you said, you got to pay your bills, and so there's just, it's business is part of the deal, and if you can wield your creativity to make your living and not have your brain hemorrhage out the top of your head, that's a place to be, man.
Item 1 on my checklist is the brain hemorrhage thing.
Yeah. It should be, and there should be a picture next to it.
It's one of those red circles with a line through it.
Oh, no, things you don't want. Number one, brain hemorrhage.
For sure. That's miserable.
I don't want that. Number two, Minotaur ear
second
disease.
Brain hemorrhage.
Yeah, second brain hemorrhage.
The first two rules of Brain Hemorrhage Club. Third rule, no smoking.
A great obscure reference to Fight Club. I love that. That was so good.
I'm glad you got that.
Deft. Very good. So, anything else?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, you're the captain of the ship. You tell me.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
Iceberg.
Captain, yeah. Let's do this. Let me ask you, what advice might you have for someone who is getting started and they're in comics and they want to kind of do what it is you're doing, and they're working a job that hemorrhage is approaching, and they're like, I'd like to plan, I'd like to make the jump. What do I need to do?
There's a lot of depends.
Sure there are. Yeah.
The first question I would always, because I've spoken to a few people about being in similar situations to this, can you reliably make money doing your creative thing? Like, is it a proven skill that you can do? The thing that gave me the confidence to do it, I think when I first started making these pens, I made like £17,500 in 30 days selling them. And it was incredible amount of work, but I was like, this it has potential. Like, I think I can be okay here. And then I sold a book like the following month. And then, I think I'd set myself the challenge. I need to sell, I don't know, this amount of drawings. I need to make this much money by the end of the week. Can I do it? And I did. And I'd often say to my students, the thing you need to think about with working freelance is, if someone says you need to make £500 or $500 by the end of the week, what can you do to do that? Because occasionally this is the situation that you are in. Can you do that? Can you think on your feet? Can you work with what you have around you right now to do that thing? Because often you are left with just your ingenuity and the tools you have at hand. Like, can you do that? And I felt, yeah, I could do that. If it's for you an unknown quantity at this point, I would work towards making that a known quantity. If your health is at risk, look after your health, number one. Like, your body's the thing you have to carry around with you until you die. Look after it, because you will die. Like 100% definite, absolutely. Ever so sorry to tell you, definitely will die. Later rather than sooner, hopefully. However, you got to look after it. So if it's a thing where your health is significantly impacted by the job you're in, I mean, get out. There's no weird pride in staying in that job. That's not good for you at all. Don't do that. Get a job that pays money. That's fine. Need money. It doesn't necessarily need to be a creative thing, especially if it's not the proven thing. If you've got the confidence and you want to try it anyway, like, go for it. Like, that's great. But I don't think there should be ever any shame in having a job and earning money. I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make that living from our art. And if you don't make your full living from your art, then you are a failure. And I think, no, that's a failure of imagination. Like, you should be able to, I don't know, run a van, run deliveries. You could do that and still be creatively fulfilled. Like, it's not an either or. Like, there can be things you do for money, and then there's things you do for yourself as well. We can imagine better futures for ourselves. So, I don't know. I always think, look after your body first. That's super important. If you've got the confidence and you've got the track record of being able to make money, yes, by all means do it. If you just have the confidence, yes, by all means do it. If you have the track record and not so much the confidence, find someone who will give you like a kick up the backside to tell you to do it anyway. That's pretty good. And have a plan B. Like, what happens after, you know, that week is up and you haven't made that money? Like, at what point do you go and find a van to drive or whatever it is that you can do to make money? But get inventive with it. I think it's just money. I know, I'm just kind of glib, but it's just money. But it is just money. And however you get it is okay.
Yeah.
Don't steal it. Unless it's from Amazon, I guess. They seem to have enough.
Those comments are not reflective of the Breakthrough Creative.
You put it in the chat. You told me to say it. Just reading the script.
Dan, I gotta go. My wife is calling.
This is a very convincing deepfake you have here of my face.
It is. It is. I need to tell my wife not to move so much because you will see her through the deepfake. No, that's great advice, man. So where can people find you, Mr. Dan Barry, if they want to find you?
Most, I think, if you just put the words "Things by Dan" into a search engine, you'll find me. That's
awesome.
It. One word, "Things by Dan." The podcast I make is called "Make It Then Tell Everybody." That combination of words will take you to that podcast wherever it exists. Yeah, I'd just search Dan Barry. I know when I search myself, I'm top of my list, but you might have a different algorithm. So "Things by Dan" is probably the one to go for.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for being my guest, man. I really,
thanks for chatting.
Had a great time. That was good stuff.
So that is part 2 of my interview with Dan Barry. Dan, thanks again for being my guest. Really appreciate you. If you want to find Dan, you can look at the links down in the episode description, and you will be able to find him there. I really appreciate Dan's thoughts on working on his craft, that we need to be working on our craft to get better and better at it. I really enjoyed a look into Dan's sketchbook, his planning book, really his pre-production book for his stories, or creating the images that are going to go with the stories, and really creating the staging for his stories. And also very interesting, 24-hour comics. I mean, that's a real challenging grind of an exercise to do this. I didn't even know that existed. So that's a really, really cool thing. And then it's so cool as well to see and hear all the things that Dan makes, all the things he does and he makes. And it's wise to have a broad variety of products and services for your clients, so that you've got enough business. It's just a smart thing to do. It's what I've tried to do with my business. I suppose if you make one widget and it's a widget that people can't find anywhere else, then you can go ahead and just make that and make your money. But I have not found that in my career in particular, and it makes life more interesting too, to be able to do a variety of things. And I'm not talking about being spread so thin you're not good at anything. That these are natural overflows of products and services from what it is that you already do. They spring forth from your creative skills and talents and become obvious as you look out for them. And it lets you build your clients as well, like more clients, a variety of clients, because you find people who need different things, and that's just a good thing to be on the lookout for. So that's it for today. On behalf of the Breakthrough Creative, I'm John McDavitt, and I hope that you are getting busy about the business of getting closer to making a living from your art. I will talk to you next week. Cheers.